Take 3. So, anyways, there we go. We got green lines across the board. We're all good.
Cops try to do
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
All right. So, oh my God, let me turn this off so I don't hear myself through my headphones because I'm not a quiet guy. All right. So, Facebook, you got us tonight. Welcome to the premiere episode of Lock and Shields. Tonight, we're locking shields with a thin blue line. That is law enforcement, for those of you who don't know. 4 of us have served and as law enforcement officers, and we're going to be talking. I also want to welcome to the show award-winning journalist Rob Schilling. So
hey, it's great to be here with you guys.
It's great to have you, Rob. Rob has an amazing show called The Schilling Show. You guys should check it out. It's absolutely amazing, and he does some investigative reporting on the local level, but he interviews people from around the globe, and it's an amazing show, and I've been going on it for about a year now, and it's been an awesome time. So anything I missed there, Rob?
You got it all. Thank you very much again for inviting me to join tonight.
Hey, no problem. So how's our sounds? How's this sound now? Give us a thumbs up if you see it. Lauren's monitoring and she's off camera. But she's right over there, and she can tell us because she told us that you guys couldn't hear us a few minutes ago. So we're talking about, again, law enforcement. So my background. My background is I was in the Navy for 16 years as a Navy SEAL. I got out after I lost my little brother to heroin, and I went to my hometown, which was the Boston Police Department, and I served there for 4 years, most of it on Boston SWAT. After that, my son was born with autism, as you guys know, and I moved to Charlottesville to slow things down and work on him. While I was there, I also did about 10 months as an Albemarle County police officer. I was over there. Tim recruited me. Mike tried recruiting me. They paid more. It didn't work out either way. So
We got it a little bit.
Yeah, for a little bit. So it was the longest 10 months of their existence, I promise you. Like, he didn't have gray hair before I met him. I gave him those gray hairs. So anyways, so that's me. I'm going to kick it to Mike Farruggio. Go ahead and introduce us. Okay, good.
Good deal. My name is Mike Farruggio.
Can you spell that, Mike?
I sure can. FARRUGGIO.
Everyone else spells it wrong, so don't worry about it.
Farruggio. So I was 4 years in the Air Force. Got out, went back to New York, went back into construction. Left that, became a New York City police officer. Did that for 2 years. Wanted a slower pace of life from New York. Came to Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia. Had a 25-year career here. Found out that policing is the same over the entire world, just a matter of how much is going on. New York City, you're stacking 20 calls an hour. Charlottesville, well, you're stacking a couple of calls. But that was a fantastic 25-year career, and I retired about 5 years ago.
All right, awesome. Tim?
Yeah, I'm Tim Seitz, first sergeant with Albemarle County Police, and I've been a police officer going on 25 years in March. Will be my 25th year. And most of that with Albemarle, a couple of years with Winchester before that. And during my time, I've been pretty much in every division within the police department working. So really enjoy it. A lot of fun.
Awesome. John?
My name's Jonathan Hickory. 15 and a half years in with Albemarle County as a master police officer. Did about a year as a reserve deputy with the local sheriff's office as well.
Do you have a shameless plug you want to get in right now?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you reach over and grab your book?
No, I have one.
Oh! Raise it up high. Wow, look at that. Hey, here we go. What is this book,
I
John?
don't know where this came from. I'm also the author of this amazing book. It's called Break Every Chain by Jonathan E. Hickory. Available
Is that you?
on Amazon.
Wow, all right.
Books a million. It's my story, and we'll talk about it more later.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Sometimes I forget myself.
No problem. And before Rob becomes a co-conspirator in all this, I think we, as law enforcement, decided that we were going to start off with our favorite topic, which is making fun of firemen. So, Tim, what is a firefighter joke that you want to start with tonight?
I can't take credit for this. This is Colonel Grossman, but
Sure.
firefighters eat till they're tired, sleep till they're hungry.
That's 100% true.
Totally true. For you firefighters out there, you know exactly what I'm talking
That
about.
goes out to my good friend Ed Fisher and Jeff Sneed.
Jason, let me ask you a question. For those that don't know, what does it mean by locking shields?
So locking shields is a concept that started way back in the ancient times, and it's where fellow warriors use their shields to protect one another. So they would basically get really close, and their shields would protect them and the brother next to them. So the whole concept of locking shields is us, whether we're going to the thin blue line tonight or the thin green line, which is military, or even the little bit wider thin red line, which is fire department. It's locking shields with those brothers and sisters around you to protect not only yourself, but the person next to you. So that's the whole concept of this. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rob and let Rob tell you a little bit about himself.
All right. Well, I'm really glad to be here, and I've had an interest in law enforcement, as most of you guys know, one way or the other. Jason, you and I talk monthly on my program about
Which is
The Schilling Show, which
where can we find that?
On AM 1070, 98.9 FM here in Charlottesville, and online at shillingshow.com.
Awesome.
So people can pick
Great
up
show, everyone.
So we talk a lot. I've had Jonathan on the program to talk about his book, and it was great. We had great response. Mike has been on many times over the years, usually about politics.
Yeah.
Not so much about law enforcement because we didn't want to get you in trouble.
That's right.
Can't mix those two.
And Tim, you're welcome. I know it can get something good out of you. So
Yeah.
we talk a little bit. But, I've been interested in a long time in law enforcement, although I've never served. When I was running for office, I'm a former city councilor in the city of Charlottesville. And I went out and did a series of ride-alongs over the course of a couple of years, and it just opened my eyes as to what was going on in the city. And when I was going around knocking on people's doors and I would tell them what I had seen, some of them got mad at me. They're like, "You're trying to sensationalize this. That can't possibly be this bad." And I mean, it was
worse.
It is worse.
It's
One
way
of the
worse.
nights that we went out, there was an officer by the name of Doug Brooks. Some of you guys may know who Doug is, and Doug's gotten out of policing. But we were driving around Charlottesville, and we went over to this club called Max Tracks, and there was a fight down there. And Doug, Doug was fearless. Doug just gets out of the car, goes down to this huge group of people, maybe 100 people, all drunk, around 2 a.m. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Because they're kind of enveloping him.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in the car. There's nobody else around. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I look in the rearview mirror. I'm locked inside the car, and I see about 4 or 5 cars rolling. I'm like, okay, Doug's okay. He comes back up. He's got blood coming out of his sleeve, and someone had just stabbed him. And so this was my ride-along experience that night. And Doug goes to the hospital, and then I went out and finished the night with somebody else. But it was, it was so eye-opening to me that any time that you guys are out and you get called on something, something can go wrong. And so I've been interested ever since then in just maintaining good relationships with local police officers and finding out from them, either on or off the record, some of the things that are going on.
No, well, thanks, Rob. For the whole purpose of this show is to, one, reach out to fellow brothers in blue, current and past, and say you're not alone. The challenges that we all face, we all share, and we're there for you. And the other reason is to basically bring some awareness to the public and say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. As Mike used to be a recruiter and Tim is still currently a recruiter for the police departments. People don't want to be cops anymore, and there's a reason for that. It's the hardest job in America right now, and it has been for a bit, but it's just getting harder. And that's unfortunate. So, this year we had a record-setting number of law enforcement deaths. We had 148, Lauren? Yep. 148 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty this year. Some of them, 63 of them were by somebody taking their life. 85 of them were by them responding to something or going to something. We just had 2 law enforcement officers who were on a call in Chicago not too long ago, hit by a train. It's just, one of the things that I found, and we're going to get into this a little bit later. People ask me, hey, Jay, what was harder for you, being a Navy SEAL or being a cop? And hands down, I'll say it was a cop. Yeah, the physical side of it and, the requirements for SEAL were higher. But for me, I'm a crusader. I love believing in a cause. And when I was a SEAL, everyone loved me. As you guys know, the military guys who are here, people would buy me drinks. Life was good.
As they do firefighters.
As they do firefighters, of course.
Comes full circle. Yes.
Friggin' firefighters. Anyways, so
We love very much.
we love them. John's got a bunch of firefighters. I got like one firefighter friend. But anyways, so John Boyle, that's going out to you. So anyways, I was used to at least my fellow Americans, supporting me. And then I became a law enforcement officer, and I volunteered for the worst neighborhood going. And, I went in there. I wanted to be a part of the community, went to church groups, tried to really reach out to the war zone in Boston. Shout out to everyone at B2, miss you guys. I just found that I was just hated. I was hated when I show up. And it wasn't just me because I was white. I was hated just because I was a cop. I remember one point I had a call that I responded to. And me and John, we talked about this during your interview. And I went to this call, and this guy beat the living crap out of his wife. Mm-hmm. And I responded to this call. And I went there, and his young son was there. His son couldn't have been more than 6. And I was like, hey, I was trying to treat him with respect. I'm like, hey, it's time to go. Do you want to step out in the hall? I don't want your son to see, you being arrested. And he turned to me and he said, no, I want him to see the police taking away his dad.
Absolutely.
I wanted
the
to
same
see
experience, the same exact experience multiple times.
And that, to me, a part of my soul just died right then and there. Mm-hmm. Here I am, trying to help. I didn't make him beat up his wife. His wife was a bloody pulp. And she went to the hospital, and here he is trying to mentor his son to hating the police from go. And that was just so foreign to me. I just couldn't fathom that, when you're in the military, when you deploy, when you're at home, you're just having a great time. You're with your family, you're doing whatever, you're still doing your job. You go overseas, you're like, okay, I'm now deployed, the threat's real. When you're a cop, that's in your own town. That's in your own neighborhood. That's in your own house.
And it's here. I mean, I'm glad you brought it up, Mike, because you said you've seen it a number of times over the years. But if we just look at public meetings in this community, and we can see this disdain for the police being expressed publicly, and we don't want police in our neighborhood, and you wonder where this is coming from. But this is absolutely real.
Oh, it's real. And Rob, thank you for mentioning that. Right now, the national media, or the mainstream media sensationalizes, bad cop behavior. Cops are like anyone else. I think you would agree. We'd all agree that there is a small amount of bad people wherever you go. But the customer service, there was a study, and I'm going to distort the numbers, but it's like so ridiculous that out of the amount of calls that police do on a daily basis, right, which is millions of calls in the most high stressful time, that in people's worst day, like the rate of complaints is minuscule. Mm-hmm. There is no other industry that can even touch it.
That's right.
That can even touch it. And, and it's just like, here they are meeting you on your worst day and your worst moment. And if they're providing great customer service and they're being heroes in their daily things, of course we have a few bad ones. And that's what they capitalize on, right? When we see these YouTube videos, when we see these things, they take one snippet, they make it look the worst, and then what happens? I mean, there's a reason why, something like 90% of cops are acquitted, because the standard is, what would a reasonable person do in that situation? So if a reasonable person was in that situation, would they feel like their life's in danger, and would they pull their firearm and use it? That is the standard. They're not ninjas. They're not, they're not, superheroes. They're average human beings.
But let's dig a little deeper into this and figure out why. Sure. Because I know why you do it, and I know you have to do it, but it almost rankles me a little bit when we start out the conversation by having to acknowledge every single time we bring it up that we know there's bad cops. Hey, there's bad people in the clergy. I think in this area, we've had more trouble, serious trouble with school teachers sexually abusing students than we have with cops who have been in trouble for whatever reason. So I just say that again because I know why you have to say it, but I want to bring it to people's attention that it is, it's unfortunate that we have to start every conversation by acknowledging something negative, even though we know it exists. It exists everywhere. It's a human condition.
That's an awesome point, Rob. I mean, that's why you are who you are. You recognize and you see these things. And cops are heroes by nature. You have people who are willingly serving and putting themselves in harm's way to, to protect people other than themselves. I mean, that's the definition of a hero, right? And unlike, the military, which the military are heroes in their own right, the part that blew me away was that it was in my hometown. And in Boston, for the first 10 years of your career, you have to live in your city. So you go and you serve in your city, right? You arrest people, you put them away, you do things, and you're forced to live there. So I remember one moment where I was with my son Connor at a movie theater, and there were some gangbangers there who were friends with a gangbanger I just put away for a long time. And I had to leave. I packed my stuff up as I'm buying tickets, and I'm out of there. Because now I'm exposing my son, my autistic son, who was probably 5 at the time, to that danger, and it just was so.
It's a great point you make. I mean, you're talking. There's so many things we can talk about. I mean, a police officer would love to work, and ideally, love to work in the city where they protect. But no cop I know wants to work and live in the same city.
No.
I mean, I did it, and it was a challenge. It was a challenge because that very same thing happened. My kids would go to school, and then someone would say, "Hey, your dad's a cop," and want to intimidate and threaten my kids, and my kids had to deal with that. I mean, that is so unfair. So guys want to take, or gals want to take their family 2 counties away, from living in the city that they have to police, and that's just, it's a reality. But it's a shame.
We have officers in our department that obviously grew up in Charlottesville, right? So not only are they working in the community, but they grew up with the people. So many people they have to arrest.
Mm-hmm.
They went to high school with them. And that's not easy. When you're doing.
What's
so
the
he might be a
dynamic
friend.
when that happens? Because people don't know, because they're not, unless they're doing what you guys are doing, they're just out there. So let's just say you're out on patrol and you have to arrest somebody you went to high school with. Do they ask you to give them leniency because you know them? I mean, do they put you in that position? Are they angry with you? What's it like?
I didn't have to deal with that because I was actually I grew up in New Jersey, but I knew people I've worked with had to deal with that.
John?
And I don't know if John can answer it any better, but
I think for the most part, most of them, they will try the leniency route and try to, say, "Hey, buddy, remember me." But at the end of the day, you got to do your job, and I think they do realize that. So
I think they gain a rapport too. I mean, if they had a good relationship with them in high school, it's going to translate when they have to make that arrest to make it obviously civil and without incident. So,
It's another interesting factor that happens that when I moved into a house in the area, when I moved into the house, I introduced myself to my neighbor, and my neighbor said to me, "Oh, I know exactly who you are. You arrested me for DUI last year." And, you arrest a lot of people for DUI. You don't remember every single face.
In Boston, we don't. I'm just saying. But in Charlottesville, no more you do. But anyways.
That's the type of dynamic in the police culture that you have to deal with, that you have to run into all the time.
Yeah, totally. Lauren, do we have anything coming in offline? Is anyone
Becky Campbell said people hold police officers to a higher standard than the average citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Smith said, "What has happened to the voice of reason?"
Can you project your voice a little bit louder so people can hear from this mic here?
Sure. Do you want me to say both of them again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Becky Campbell, who some of you all know here, said people hold police officers to a higher standard than the average citizen. And Paul Smith said, "What has happened to the voice of reason?"
Well, the voice of reason went out a long time ago. Oh, man. Unfortunately, as we've seen, it continues to go down. I mean, I remember, people ask me, when did law enforcement take a turn? And I can only talk about the time that I served, which was, in total 5 years. But I can tell you a drastic shift that happened. It was with the previous administration. I remember serving before the former president, not Trump, but the guy before him, who was serving, and that whole dust up that happened in Cambridge. So I was in Boston at that time, and there was, a friend of President Obama's from college, a professor, was arrested in Cambridge, and he was irate because he was breaking into his own house, and the police asked him for an ID to prove he lived there so they could go about their merry way. And he threw a tantrum. It was a national story. And the president, mosquito. Holy smokes. Yeah. We all locked eyes with that mosquito. So who's going to get bit here? That's the question is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Italian blood.
So, I remember the very moment when my job became harder. And it was when the president got on TV and said it was obvious. I don't know all the facts, but the Cambridge police behaved stupidly.
Mm-hmm.
Without knowing all the facts, he basically put the blame on law enforcement. And everyone who I arrested in that community told me they were going to call Obama after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to bring politics into this, but I remember how that cut the legs out from me. From that point on, we were all stupid cops. And our authority.
Even the president thinks so.
Yeah, even the president thought so. And his attorney general, Eric Holder, thought so, which as he prosecuted cops or attempted to prosecute cops from here on out from that point, from there on out. So, I remember the moment where it turned. And I remember, talking to guys who are still on the job, they talk about how, during the past administration, and particularly in Boston, they would stay in there. They wouldn't do proactive policing.
No.
When I was on, and Mike probably when you were on, and still here, maybe you guys do it, but we would be out cruising, looking to stop
Looking for
trouble.
crime.
Yeah,
Jason, New York City, right?
Right.
I'm thinking, well, I go to my academy class. I'm like, well, how do you arrest people doing? You get a pair of binoculars, you go hide in there. You look at the store. I'm like, well, that sounds cool. You talked about what type of people want to become police officers. Well, people that have a strong sense of justice and A-type personalities that want to hunt. Because if you don't want to hunt, then you're going to trip over stuff. So you go out and so you used to be proactive. We should go out and hide to look to catch somebody doing something wrong. Some guys love doing traffic, me not so much. But crime, well, but crime, felonies are something you could sink your teeth into. So now the guys and gals, they don't do it. They go and they park because they're going to bring wrath down on. This is what I see. They're going to bring wrath down on them. So why subject yourself?
So
to that?
let's go further with that, because there's a ramification of that, which means all of the work that was being done before, the preemptive work, that stops. What happens to those neighborhoods and those neighbors who are no longer being protected by preemptive policing?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, there's no stat to say it's an impossible number to say what could we have stopped.
But we know,
Yeah.
we know just out of being intelligent individuals that if you're not doing that and you were successful before, that there is a percentage of things that are happening that would not have
Well,
otherwise
you
happened.
can just look at the statistics of the arrests and the traffic stops that were made. And I watched this before I retired and years before I retired, where you see in one community, ours, the numbers slowly go down over a year, right? So a lot of those crimes are things you have to go find. If you're responding to a call for service, then you have to react to the call for service. But when the numbers start going down, the traffic stops start going down, you realize that's a loss of proactivity.
Yeah, and I remember when I called back home, I have a lot of friends who are still on the Boston Police Department. And I remember during the previous administration calling them and saying, hey, how you doing, man? I mean, this is awful. How you doing? And they basically would say, Jay, we sit in the parking lot and we respond to calls.
Yeah.
So they stopped going out and trying to prevent crime and only responded to crime in action because they knew that if they were afraid of being accused of overzealousness. They were afraid of doing all these other things. Cops were being ambushed, and which is another reason. And they're like, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Something else we've got to get back to, right, is some of those things. We talk about one of the things that we were talking about that we wanted to talk about was how many occupations in the country, when you go to work, you have to put on a uniform. Quite a few. How many of them you got to put on a bulletproof vest underneath that uniform?
Very few. Yeah.
How many then do you have to put on 15 pounds of duty gear around your waist? That I've got a friend today I was talking to, his back's not so hot after 27 years of carrying a belt on him, right? Even few. How many then have people trying to intentionally assassinate them?
Yeah.
Tell me any of the occupation? Not firefighters.
Lauren's got a question.
Question from Aaron Donahue. How can citizens who support law enforcement help to change the situation?
Wow, that's a great question. Anybody want to answer that?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I notice is we feel, the perception is that we're hated and we're not liked. But the fact of the matter is more people support the police and love the police than dislike the police. It's just the media hypes up on everything that's negative.
Well, and the loudest voices,
The
like you
squeakiest wheel,
Yeah.
it's the oil. So you think it's less, but the persecution is real. Even though we've got citizens supporting us, the persecution is real. So that's why the guys back off, because they're going to get persecuted, even if the majority support them.
Yeah, one of the things that really made my day is when someone would come up and thank a police officer.
Yeah.
And usually there was two people who liked in my neighborhood, the neighborhoods I'd go to, which were the worst ones, that liked me. It was the older generation and the extremely young generation.
Kids.
Right? So young kids, before they were soured by the media and by culture and by music and everything else, when I say culture, they would thank me and they think I was a good guy. And then that greatest generation would say, hey, thank you for doing what you're doing. Everyone else other than that, in between, it was straight anger. I mean, I remember showing up to a call. There's a woman hanging out of the third floor screaming for help. And there's 2 gallons of blood on the pavement. And I roll up and I've got 10 people saying there's nothing to see here.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you here? There's nothing here. I'm like,
We don't want you here.
we don't want you here. And I'm like, what? Like, what twilight zone is this? And that is, that is what our guys are dealing with, that insanity, which takes its toll, which we're going to get to in a bit. So let's bring this back to what we really wanted to, one of the big topics we want to talk about, which was why are cops being killed and why are cops dying more today than ever before? Maybe back in the Wild West days, right, we could rival those numbers. But, in modern history, Lauren, you got something?
Just a quick question before you transition. Paul Smith, this is for Jonathan, said, what is the main reason you are still in uniform, Jonathan?
Why am I still in uniform?
Because you got a retirement, you got to.
That's one thing.
What a bad reason.
Book sales haven't hit 10 million.
You want to see him get out of law enforcement? Buy
those
1 million books.
So I think you guys can all agree with, once you've been bitten by the bug, it's pretty hard to walk away from law enforcement. It's something that you feel like you're called to do. And it's always something that even if you're able to retire and get into something else, you'll always miss it. And so I still love what I do. And yes, I've been down some hard roads personally because of it. Oh, the camera.
Yeah.
Reflecting.
I mean, you get your Scully cap on,
Yeah.
so,
Oh yeah, the skelly cap.
We had to put the hat on because the light was reflecting on the head and there was a glare. We were like, holy smokes. But anyway, so
But yeah, it's just because I love it. I love serving others, and that's what's in my heart, and that's why I still am in law enforcement.
well, God
Thank
bless
you.
you for that.
Thank you for
Tim, why do you still serve? Other than you run a desk.
I'm not
He's
really
got,
desk anymore.
no?
Well, part-time.
Yeah, he's got the best job in the freaking Alabama County Police Department. Tell us about it, Tim.
No, I still enjoy it. I still enjoy going to work every day. I enjoy helping people. I mean, that's what it comes down to at the
Cool.
end. They always say protect and serve,
Yeah.
but when you first get into it, you get into it somewhat for selfish reasons, for all the action. But as you get older, you realize that the real reason you do it is to help people.
Cool.
So, question from Frida Luce Wagner. Have any of you read the book War on Cops by Heather McDonald? And then Lou Costanzo said, since the past administration, the police and citizens relationship has been strained to the point that either side trust each other. How do we get back to common trust? If you want to address either of those questions.
So, go ahead.
No,
Yeah, I've read the book and I've interviewed
great
her
book.
on the program a few times. And
Well, he just went up me. I just read the book.
but the point is that I can read the book, but I want, it's the same reason I have you on the show and I'll, any of you to come on the show, is that, someone can put it in a book, but those stories have to get out there and that information has to get out there. And it's remarkable to me that a book like that exists and a lot of people probably haven't heard of it and are totally unaware of what it says and what's in it. And so I think people need to search these things out so that they're informed when it comes to the topic of law enforcement about what's really going on.
Yeah.
What was the other question, Lauren?
How do we gain trust
How do we-
again?
The other one was,
Traction.
boiled down to how do you gain the trust back?
So can I take
Sure.
My feeling on that is not only is it on the responsibility of our political leadership, but also the responsibility of our nation, our media. So
Just try to help out, John.
thank you, I appreciate it. So our media needs to start painting pictures of police officers in a positive light and do a better job of that, and bring more awareness to law enforcement being killed senselessly. And what can the average American do that wants to support law enforcement? Live your life in a way that is supportive of law enforcement, being respectful, but also teach your children to respect law enforcement. How many people do you see that where they teach their children to be afraid of the police?
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about.
When you, how many times does this happen to you guys?
Exactly
When
what
you,
you're
you know,
saying.
I'm going to say, right?
Right.
You go on a call and it's like, he's
Yep.
going to take you to jail.
Yep.
He's going to take you to jail.
Right.
He's going to take
Better be
you. I mean,
good.
I've had that happen to me hundreds of times, and not because I was arresting anybody either. Just walking up saying, "Hey, how you doing? Don't talk to him. He's going to take you to jail."
Yeah.
So I mean, they set it up. To add on to that, I think the one of the biggest problems we have is, you know, the media in general is there to make a buck. And they're going to set sensation sells. What's the old newspaper adage about
If it bleeds, it leads.
if it bleeds,
Yeah.
it leads, right? So, I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. They're trying to make money. But they do see the police in a negative light, and it does influence masses of people.
There's something really important that happened here, and I don't know if any of you guys know about this, but it was within the last 3 or 4 months, a group that is supportive of law enforcement, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, came to town and issued an invitation to the media, all of the local media, and by the way, the local city councilors, to come in and get active shooter training. So they took us, and they took about an hour and a half. It was a 3-hour get together. They put us in a little hotel room, and then they said, okay, here are the legal principles. Here's what you have to know if you're a police officer about using force. And then they put us in front of a simulator. And it was like, I saw 3 people get killed because I was too scared to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
You know, because of all the stuff that's going on. And of course, this is just a simulation. But the thing that made me so sad about all of this is they offered this to the entire media in Charlottesville. They reached out to everybody and all the city councilors and maybe the board of supervisors too. There was 3 people there. One person came from Harrisonburg. I was there. And there was somebody, I think, from one of the television stations. And that was it. They had planned to do 2 sessions. They just canceled the afternoon session. And nobody even knew about it. And I went back on and talked about it because I was just astounded at how quickly you, in that position, have to make a decision whether to fire on somebody or not.
Well, that's the whole standard of what's reasonable. Go ahead, Tim.
I just want to piggyback on what he was talking about. Is there's not an officer in the country that wants to use lethal force if they have to.
Oh.
For a lot, they have to live with the rest of their lives. I know 2 officers I work with that it haunted their entire career. You know, and not to mention all the public criticism. You know, you got internal affairs investigation, a criminal investigation is done. So here's a law-abiding police officer who's out there trying to do the right thing. Next thing you know, they're kind of on the other side of the law. They're looking at whether or not the Commonwealth Attorney is going to prosecute them. So nobody wants to do that. I think that's one thing we don't do in law enforcement enough is project that, explain to the citizens what an officer goes through after an officer is off shooting.
Jason, there was many years ago, Rob, I think you were here then. Do you remember You've Got a Friend?
Yes.
Day?
Yeah.
So we had a program in Charlottesville. Barry McLean started this program way back in the 90s, 92, 93, and it went on for over 10 years. It's called You Got a Friend Day. And he organized this with a lot of help from a lot of other folks, where we would bring 150 police departments to Charlottesville. We would fill the entire Charlottesville High School parking lot all the way around with displays from police departments all over the state. The entire community was invited. It was entirely free. We have all sorts of, we had not playing cards, baseball cards that we gave to all the kids. They would get the cards and they would try to find us and get us to sign the cards, to autograph them. And free popcorn and cotton candy for the kids. We would have SWAT demonstrations. We would have motor demonstrations. This went on for years. And the entire community would come to this and love it. And then they're just like the interest started waning. Nobody in the police department, because cops are cops. They're not like marketing people, and they're not like really great. We know there's no real great managers in police work, right? So it fell to the side, and now that program doesn't happen anymore. And that the training that you're talking about is incredible. We've probably all seen, because in our circle, we've seen when a city councilor someplace in the nation does that and lets the news film them, and then the city councilor says, "I never knew you had it so hard." But that does not happen enough. So if there was a way to, I mean, I'm ashamed that only 3 people showed up.
It was
every city councilor, county board of supervisors.
Does that surprise you?
It doesn't.
It doesn't surprise you. Why?
It doesn't.
Because to be pro-cop goes against their political platform. right? Unfortunately, how you feel about police is typically dictated on how you vote, unfortunately. And I'm not here to gang up on one party or the other, but it's just like active shooter training. How you think to solve the active shooter equation is based on your party. How you feel about police is based on your party. When people are shouted down for saying Blue Lives Matter, I mean, what does that say? What does that say when guys who go out there and put their family's well-being at risk, not just their life, but their family's life when they die?
So what you said is really important, because the reason they didn't come, and the guys who put this on they didn't want to make a deal of it, but I noticed it and I asked them about it. It's because it destroys the narrative. So if you have this narrative that you say over and over, the police are bad, they're abusing people, we have all these problems, and then you go to this thing and you learn otherwise and you understand the difficulty, you can't hold on to that narrative anymore because you're on record as having been through this thing and experiencing it. It's much easier to just ignore it, and then you don't have to deal with reality.
That's right. Just ignore it.
You know, what we find with anything is that there's a reason, you know, we're all lacking empathy. It's for understanding the other side, right? You know, I sat down with a really good friend of mine who's a Democrat in city government in Richmond. And he's a Christian man, and I was able to have a very strong, in-depth conversation with him because we shared that bond. And, you know, I don't know how we get back to the common ground, which just goes to Lou Costanza's question of building trust.
Yep.
Right? The building trust is one, the media has to start being responsible. Right? They need to start doing pro stories again. I remember local news stations doing that, but national, now that you have Fox and CNN and MSNBC and God knows how many others, having a balance of coverage to bring perspective. That perspective is huge. If the only time you hear about cops is when they make a bad arrest, what are you going to assume? You know,
bad.
right? So, Rob, you're the only one here in media. You know, when you go to your media functions, I mean, you interview people all over the place. I've heard you interview reporters. I've heard you interview people on both sides of this. You know, I mean, what are we going to do to start holding them accountable or, you know, get them to start being responsible?
This is the biggest challenge, I think, is because you have people coming into it who have no perspective in life. You know, they're only looking at it from one side. They're not interested in looking at the other side. They're not interested. I mentioned earlier going on a police ride-along. That was so eye-opening for me. And there was an addictive quality to it. I mean, you mentioned how much you enjoy the work. Yeah. I mean, for me, I didn't just go once. I went maybe a dozen times because there was something about it that was also very interesting, and I wanted to just see what was going on in the community, and I understand that. But I think the problem with the media is that they're just coming into it. You get people that are just fresh out of school, and they do not educate themselves. They come in with the story already written in their head, and then they look for incidents that will tell that story.
Well, how could they be objective when you have so many, you know, colleges right now brainwashing our kids from go, you know, and it's horrible. You know, I remember a friend of mine who went to Michigan, who's now a SEAL, and he was telling me he would write a paper from a conservative perspective, same intellectual property, his thoughts, and he'd write it from the conservative, you know, talking points to a liberal professor, and he would get a D. The teacher would say, rewrite this. He'd write it from the liberal, you know, in a liberal perspective, and he'd get an A+. I mean, what do we do? You know, how do we take back our schools and take it back to the point where we have people who are teaching respect for authority, respect for, you know, your law enforcement, people putting their life on the line for everyone else?
You know, Lou's question is so hard.
Profound.
It's so hard to answer. I mean, what do you do? Well, I can tell you one thing. What motivates people? Well, we know what motivates most media. It's commercials, making money, right? So what motivates people that are running for office? Sometimes it's, you know,
the
wind, right? And so if people started demanding that the people that they vote for would care about the police, if the citizens would start talking about, look, I want to support law enforcement, whether I'm a Democrat or Republican or an independent, I want to support law enforcement. If they started getting that message, then the politicians would suddenly start caring about law enforcement more.
There's something really bad that happened here, and I'm not going to name the name, but there's somebody in the local area who's elected who went up on Facebook and recently and put in a shield with a blue line across it, and we should support law enforcement. And that person was attacked viciously in this community. Not only was the person attacked online, but they were doxing this person. Here's where they live, how much their house is worth. All because of that. That was like sticking your toe in the water and getting your head chopped off because you did it. So what you're saying is important. But how is it that we're going to get people to even say one little small thing about being in support of law enforcement when these violent groups gang up on them online and just trash them?
Well, and you know where and how that happens. You have institutions, right? Particularly universities who breed anti-law enforcement sentiment. And we've seen that local, right? And how do you hit them? How do you hit back at a university? You stop going to their football games. And yes, I'm you know who I'm talking about.
But how do you get the governing body of that institution to not have those people or a high percentage?
There's only one way that they're going to
professors?
care, and that's by hitting their bottom line.
Again,
And the only way of hitting their bottom line is by, hey, instead of going to that UVA football game, I'm sorry, UVA, you know, or a UVA baseball game or UVA basketball game or UVA anything, when they're putting out professors who are 100% anti-law enforcement and they have flipped an entire city against law enforcement, the only way to hit back is I'm not going to a game. I haven't been to a game since then. I won't go to a game.
But we're seeing this even below. There was an incident that I reported on, and this was at one of the local high schools in Albemarle County, putting on a play. And in the background, this was something about someone who got the police officer killed the friend or something like that. But there was a sign up in the back, and one of the things that was written on there was "F the police," you know. And I saw this, and I made an issue of it, and I wrote a story about it and talked about it. And of course, people wanted to attack me for that. They eventually ended up changing it. But everyone was saying how great this was, and I'm saying, you know, why don't you have at least something balanced? You know, because the whole perception is F the police. There was nothing good about the police in any of the promotion for this thing. Not one good thing, only that they did something bad. And so like you're saying, is it any wonder this is what we're turning out in our society?
Well, then you go to a school like, you know, a recognized school like St. Anne's, and you walk into their room and you look to the left and you see anti-cop sentiment on their wall. Walk in right into their room on the left side of the wall, and there is anti-cop sentiment the second you walk into their building.
Stand in the classroom where the children are learning.
All right, not even the classroom, it's their lobby.
Oh my
You walk in, the students make it, and it's right there on the left. I walked in, I blew me away.
Influencing every student culturally and through peer pressure that's acceptable.
Exactly. So if you're getting that in private institutions, you know, which are parents unplugging? Do they not care? They don't notice?
Well, where are the adults in society now? Because if that was going on in a school, like that school or any other school, there needs to be somebody in a position of authority who's willing to stand up and say, you know what, this is not an appropriate thing to have here. Everybody is too scared, like, oh, that you're going to step on their First Amendment rights or their freedom of speech. But they don't just become people by growing up with no guidance. I mean, you grow up because people tell you this is right, this is wrong. Here's how to respect people. Here's what's appropriate. Here's what's not. And so my fear is when I hear a situation like that, and we have plenty in this community, is that there's no adult in the room standing up and saying, that's just inappropriate. You may have some issues. We could talk about them, but that is inappropriate.
How do you fight that when, you know, a vast amount of their peers in academia are from one political party? You know, when it's the popular opinion and you're the person who's trying to stand up for what's right,
so here's
and all of a sudden you're called an ist.
Right, but this is the hardest part. And I say this about politicians, and I think I served this way as a politician because I ran for re-election and I lost. But I didn't care. So if you're in a career path, if you're in politics, if you're a school teacher, you might just have to be willing to sacrifice your career and go do something else or stop working at that place if it gets to that. When people start standing up, there's a guy recently who refused to refer to someone as a gender that they had imagined about themselves. And he said, I'll call you by the name you want, but I'm not going to play that game. Right. And this guy was fired because of it. But he could have easily just said, I'm going to save my career. I'm going to save all this torment. I'm probably going to get on social media, my family and everything else by just capitulating and apologizing. But he didn't do it. I don't know what's happened to him, but I do know that that is the example that we need to set.
And,
So-
and that 99 out of 100 probably take the easier path.
That's right. And we don't even hear about it, maybe.
Right.
So is this part of the, the degrading of our society to where it's okay to kill a cop? Because I believe that's where we're at. I believe that because the media, the mainstream media feeds such a frenzy into cop hating that we dehumanize them to the point where we're in a war against authority and that they now become mutual combatants and you can kill a cop.
I think we're in that environment right now because what we're seeing, and again, we can look in local public meetings, but if somebody says something that you don't like, it is now amongst a large population in America okay to physically assault them because you're somehow doing the right thing by hitting somebody if they give offensive speech to you. We know that's going on here. That was not the case in America even a few years ago. So why not by extension, hey, I'm going to be a hero. I'm just going to go out and because the police are bad, so I'm going to go kill a cop and do something good for society. I mean, that's the twisted thinking that we're dealing with right
The
now.
value of life is lessened. It really has.
Yeah.
The value of life is less than life less. And talking about Colonel Grossman, he talks about it. And this is it's not out there, but I believe it. There's a lot of violent video games these kids are growing up with. It desensitizes violence.
Yeah,
I think that's.
I'm a little torn on that. So, I mean, I know that he preaches that and he's got a very good legitimate argument on that. But I also see the other side of it. I know where consequences were real, where public beheadings and hangings and, people being in stockades and all those things were a much harder time. Like there is a large portion of this population that believes that the hamburger meat in your grocery store is grown.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That a cow didn't have to die for you to get that meat. That you're evil because you're killing a cow because you can just go to the grocery store or, and they grow it there, So having that disconnect because we're so far removed from the process of life and death, right? And we only experience it for the most part artificially through video games. That the consequences and the humanization or the dehumanization of a person is so far removed from our reality that it just makes it, you just start feeding this frenzy. Now, I'll be honest. I mean, I turn on the news media today and it takes me less than 5 minutes to want to start screaming at my TV.
Or turning it off.
Or turning it off. So I want to be informed. I'm in the news business now. I'm kind of, I said you're the only one in their media, but I'm kind of in the media thing, baby steps. But anyways, I turn it on because I want to be informed. And I swear to Jesus that I was on there and I turned it on and I had made a commitment that day. I'm not going to be angry. And within 2 minutes, I just happened to tune into my weak spot on one of these channels. I'm cussing at my TV out loud, screaming at the dude.
Lauren, I
This doesn't even matter
told
what
you
you
to
do.
cancel CNN.
No, that was even on.
It
That was
doesn't matter. It's even. They all do.
Yeah.
They all,
they're covering it. I'm just like, how can you feel that way? And it's because we have such different backgrounds. So I've got a family member who is a totally different existence, never, has a great life, has great kids, has challenges like we all have challenges, but never served in any capacity for anyone outside of their own family. We see 180 on every issue. Why do you think that is? Because they've always put themselves first. What is it like to put yourself second? Put your family second. People ask me, how do you vote? Do you vote for a pay raise? I've never voted for a pay raise for myself once. I voted for what's best for society as I believe it, at great detriment to myself. I remember being in Boston and the union there is very strong and the union's telling me to vote a certain way. And I turned to them and I said, no. Like, that's a pay raise. That's more whatever. And I'm like, I don't care. It's wrong. It's wrong. And I'm going to vote the way I want to vote because I don't vote what's best for me. I vote what's best for my country. How many people do that?
So you're talking about in the voting booth and in your own personal statements to the union, the same thing that I was talking about earlier, because you put yourself on the line there. I'm sure there were people who were very unhappy.
Very.
I mean, you could have done it quietly, but you let them know, which is important. And I think that's what we're all called to do. I think that's what we're called, the way we're called to raise up our children, to do that, because that's how things are going to change. I mean, you know, as our kids come up and become influences in society, they're going to be fighting an even greater wave of these indoctrination hostages. And so we've got to train them to be strong too, because otherwise it's very easy for them to just get pulled down and not be willing to do what you just said.
But look, you know, locally we have a lot of support in this county and the city. We've got our own police foundation for the county, both for the city, and those people are out there every day promoting us in a positive light. So it's not all doom and gloom either. You know?
But more people have to get involved. So Charles Warner came on the other day to talk about this.
Who's Charles Warner?
Is a former fire chief in Charlottesville and now the head of the Albemarle County Police Foundation. And so, you know, he came on to talk about something that they were doing to benefit local officers. We're going to have a movie showing of Die Hard and a reception for them.
It is a Christmas movie.
That's
Die Hard, a Christmas movie?
Absolutely.
Die Hard, a Christmas movie?
it is now.
It is. It is a Christmas movie. Lauren, you can't see off screen. It's like, why is Die Hard a Christmas movie? It happens over Christmas. They sing Christmas carols, and it ends on a bright note. That's why it's a Christmas story. Santa Claus was. Now I have a machine gun too. Ho, ho, ho. Hans Gruber, one of the best bad guys ever. All right.
So Tim, you're right. It's there. But I think what we need is not just, and I don't know how many people are supporting, but not just a small group of people, not just Charles doing all the work. But one of the things I asked him was, how can people help? You know, what do you need? Because, and he said, well, people can donate, but what else do you need? You know, are there volunteer opportunities? Because you just can't have a group like that be successful over the long run when there's just like 2 or 3 people who are pulling all the weight.
Right.
And so this is a good opportunity for people who feel the way and the questions that have come in tonight to get involved with these groups and put their own skin in the game.
All right, so I want to shift gears now.
And I have a segue question
Go ahead.
too, if you want to. So Luke Costanzo said, I understand that police hiring is down. Is that true?
Yes, and we're going to get into that management hiring. Yeah. So right now with sentiment, it's actually on, I would say, on a slight rebound. As the previous administration moves out, and as we put enough daylight between the past administration and the current one, but we don't have an attorney general who's made it a full-time job prosecuting cops for any perceived, you know, wrongdoing. I think it's correcting slowly. You're going to have to talk about this on your side. You would agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Mike and I talked about this before the show came on. You know, when he and I went through, when I went to Albemarle High School, the first time I applied with Albemarle PD, there was 250 people in the room for like 2 positions. And I recruited for 5 years. I'm not there anymore. I'm not behind a desk anymore.
Oh, just I thought so. Anyways, in Boston, I competed against 25, 24, 25,000, and I'm just saying. Anyways,
New York
Pat him
City.
on the back, will you?
When I went for New York City, it was 50,000 people taking the test. And-
but they hired 20,000. Just
No,
kidding.
they hired thousands. They hired thousands. That police department at the time had 40,000 police officers.
Yeah.
Right. When I came to Charlottesville and I started doing recruiting, in the very early times we had 150, 200 people, 50 come out and take a test. And then I went out of recruiting, so I heard it's dropped off greatly. But it always is hard, and there's a lot of pressure on you as a recruiting officer to recruit. What politicians want is a balanced police department that represents the community that you're policing, right?
All right.
So they want the exact percentages. They want you to strive for the same percentages of women, same percentages as all minorities, et cetera. But that makes it really, really hard, and you have to almost fake what you're trying to do. Because a lot of those minorities and a lot of women, just by the very nature of who they are, they really don't want to become police officers. And then the police department is judged critically in the media and by our own politicians because we don't have enough minorities in the department. And you can't say, well, the minorities don't want to become police officers. No, that's because you're not appealing yourself to them. So it's like a double-edged sword. You're not going to win. And it was very, very difficult.
I think there's another part that we need to take one step further with that, because there's an implication here. If you're getting people who really don't want to be there, I would imagine that the quality of service will suffer in some way. You can't change somebody's heart whose heart is not in it, even if they're coming in for a different reason. That may not be the best police officer.
I will say with the public sentiment, though, the people that are applying today, you got to tip their hat to them, because even they're applying and going through all this stuff, even knowing what's going on in the media and what's going on nationally. So, I mean, you got to tip your hat. They really want to serve.
Yeah. Like when somebody comes to me and says, like, "Hey, I want to be a police officer." I'm like, whoa.
What, are you sure?
What's wrong?
Yeah, what's wrong with you, man? Yeah.
But there's something else on the numbers, and it goes to the other side. There's a big discussion in Charlottesville right now about a disproportionate minority contact. And, how many people are you stopping on the street and talking? How many people are going to jail? So I asked a few years ago to Bob Fenwick, who was then a city councilor, and I said, well, are we looking at male versus female? Are we doing the same thing and asking, we have this number of males, because I know the number is far higher than females. So why is nobody complaining about that? Because that's right in your face. Well, that's because the males are committing the crimes. He didn't understand the irony of his response. I just let it rest there.
Yeah, well, some people still won't be able to connect those dots.
So much you can do.
That's right.
So I want to shift gears if we could, and let's get to the serious matter of this nature. So we've been having a good time. We've been talking about some things. So let's talk about law enforcement deaths. All right. So I just want to say I lost my brother earlier this year to, he was a Boston cop, he was a detective, and they promoted him to sergeant after he died. And I went there to that funeral, and I watched every cop in the city of Boston turn up for that. I watched them give him full honors. I watched church packed with cops come in there and do it. And, and this is for a guy who died out of the line of duty. All right. Meaning he was just so well loved. He got cancer, died of cancer at a very young age with young kids. And up there, the thin blue line means something. Okay. As I move south, and as you guys, I found that the thin blue line down here is nowhere near as thick as I liked it, as I enjoyed up north. I don't know why that is. I don't know what that is. Maybe we can talk about that. Police now, every day we used to fly a Trident Shield logo on our website when a cop died. And we'd say, we'll leave it up for a week. And then cops were dying so much, we would have had to change our logo permanently to a Trident Shield with a ribbon across it because so many cops were being killed or dying in the line of duty, never mind off the line of duty, which we'll get to with Jonathan and the rest of us. But, how, to the people out there, to the average citizen right now, or to the family member, the family member who's watching, because that's who we're probably going to reach, right? We have cops who are watching, they get it, their family members are trying to understand. How do we help them, right? How do we, as a society, pony up and basically be there for them when tragedy strikes, right? So I thought it was amazing when my brother Danny Bosman was my stepbrother. We were together since we were 13, and he died of cancer. His fellow officers up north started a foundation in his name, and they do golf tournaments. Before he even died, they were doing golf tournaments and raising money for him, knowing that he's not going to be there, and taking care of him being around and all that stuff. I fear for my brothers further south of the Mason-Dixon, where that thin blue line is not as robust, where they don't have those generational ties to that community. What happens in Alabama if somebody gets killed in the line of duty? Do they have that? I don't know. And you guys have been around a little bit longer down here than I. Do you find that? Do you find guys giving $50 out of their paycheck a month to try to support a fellow officer who died?
I think that the thin blue line, although you might not be able to fix a ticket down here.
Yes. So let me go into a story here. Here we go. So Jonathan Hickory was my field training officer for a day down here. And we're cruising for one day. I think it's one day.
He couldn't handle it.
Yeah. So we're cruising, and we're talking about, hey, if, he's like, hey, if you're a cop and you're not wearing your seatbelt, you're going to get a ticket. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? I'm like, if you do that, and I do rolling stops and this and that, no one ever gets a break. But anyway, so I'm just giving John.
I don't remember saying that.
Yeah. If you're not wearing a seatbelt, let me tell you something. I don't care if you're the president of the United States.
No, I do think that we may not be as kind to each other as as they are up in New York and Boston. That's true.
Virginia's got a terrible reputation.
But
Just saying.
the police in Virginia,
Stadies here are the worst.
yeah, they are.
You see that? Even he threw the Stadies under the bus.
I mean,
Chuck Hewitt, that's coming out to you.
That's just the way. I love them. But on the serious level, like as far as tragedy, when tragedy strikes, that's when we do lock
Come
shields.
together.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we do, and there's no joke about that. So
Does it last?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that what you have that's different in the Northeast or even in California is you've got such a concentration of people that you can do more, seemingly do more. So
That's fair. I think that's fair.
yeah, so there's, when you got 40,000 cops in New York City or 30,000 now,
And everyone kicks in $10, it goes big
does,
way.
It does a
Yeah.
whole lot,
The
right?
union probably has something to do
Unions,
with
big
it.
unions, and
FOP's
unions
big
help
up there.
tremendously. So I think that's part of it. But I do think that and this is one thing that I've learned about policing when I've traveled over to, in Spain and Switzerland and Italy and France, and I talk to other cops, because you know how it is. You're like, oh, let's go talk to the police, and you tell them they're a cop. As soon as you tell them that, show them your badge, they're hugging you and wanting to talk to you about work. I suppose it's the same with firefighters, but that brother.
No, they walk up with a big lighter and be like, "Do you see it?" And they're like, "I see it." So that's their secret handshake.
The brotherhood that we have, I think, is just as thick. It is kind of odd that the more further you go south, they were, they're not going to write their mom a ticket, but they're going to write another cop a ticket. So I don't get that, but the brotherhood is so strong between the thin blue line, and that's really, in my opinion, the thin blue line is really the thin blue line. We want to say the thin red line, the thin green line. There's nothing like law enforcement. We are the thin blue line between, society and doing right and doing wrong. And that line
Good
connects
and
every
evil.
single one of us. Good and evil, man. Good and, hopefully we'll have enough time. We'll get to the conversation where it turns to good and evil, because, I hope we get to that. That's a critical juncture for what we're talking about.
Right.
But if I can, I'll segue right now into the line of duty deaths, right?
Sure.
So there's always about 2/3 to 3/4 that occur in accidents. And then 1/3.
Driving used to be the most dangerous thing ever.
Well, and 1/3 to 1/4 that are intentional
Still is.
deaths. So if you take all of the deaths that are accidental, they're hazards of the occupation, right? They're occupational threats. We do have to drive cars. Doesn't matter whether it's enjoyed or not, at a higher speed, trying to catch up to a speeder or trying to go to a call to save someone's life. That puts you at higher risk. You're on a motor. You were on a motor. You were on a motor. I was on a motor. You're on a motor.
Tell me, you on a motor?
Bicycle.
I wouldn't have admitted it.
I said not yet. Even the gallery around.
I had to give him something, man.
Oh, my brother Jerry
I knew
was a
exactly what he
bicycle
was getting
officer.
So-
Sorry.
So the occupational hazards are there, right? So that's driving. It's, my God, the two guys that get by a train. I mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, what's up with
you're
that?
a train worker, man. You do that every day, so your head's on a swivel for that train. You're a cop. You're going over there as a situation, man. You don't hear it, and so the occupational hazards put aside, right? They're higher than many other occupations. But then the intentional deaths, where someone says, "I'm going to kill you because I don't like you," or "I'm going to kill you because I'm not going to jail."
Right.
Right? That's the thing that is got to be such a priority of a focus for. I know it is for us. Those that are law enforcement and the family members. The Officer Down Memorial page. That for us is the crux of it all, because someone is killing you intentionally.
Well, that's the thing that bothers me the most is with the media, sensationalizing these things. I know there are cops out there who have died because they're afraid to pull their weapon.
Oh yeah.
They're afraid to do the right thing. They're afraid to defend themselves because they're going to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we'll never get those lives
The
back.
hesitation.
There's no way of ever telling that. I mean, yeah, you're right.
Well, I've seen them. I've seen the media award and praise someone who was totally legitimate in a shoot situation, go 10 steps beyond, risk his life to the point and not do it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like now you're reaffirming that how many lives you're going to cost in that, because that is not what we should be training.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing. There's a Police Marksman magazine, phenomenal magazine for firearms instructors. If you don't read it regularly, they dissect police shootings in depth, right? And they make the hard calls. That, you know, every single issue talks about, look, don't take any judgment from what we're saying here in this article, because when a police officer is killed, they dissect it and they say, this police officer should have taken his firearm out sooner. This police officer should have been covering down on that suspect sooner. This police officer should not have attempted to use the taser in this situation. He should have used a pistol. So a lot of times, and we do critique ourselves, but it doesn't get out there enough in the mainstream police department unless you're a firearms and tactics instructor, that you can't, for your family's sake, for your other officers' sake, you have got to utilize your training and be.
All right,
There's something, we are doing a lot in Albemarle and Charlottesville too. Officers go through an 18-week basic, but then we put them through another 6 weeks part. And I don't know if they had that when you were there. I think it started after you left, but it's advanced training that our own officers put on to the.
I know a guy who came up with that idea of advanced training command. It might be Jay Perry. He might be sitting right here. I'm just saying. There you go. There you go.
It was a good thing.
Yeah.
It's 6 weeks of intensive training, and it goes above and beyond what the basic academy.
Who would think of that?
It's not from New York or Boston.
There's something beyond what you said.
Sitting over there.
So you said that they may be hesitant to do this because they don't want to be judged. But I think that what we have seen happen in the media is that you can see police officers not only who are judged, but their whole life is ruined, and they have to go into hiding.
Yeah.
They have to leave the community and go somewhere rural and just to
sell
get away.
insurance.
Yeah, and do something else because there's so much on the line, and all it takes is one story, one reporter who paints it a certain way, and the news cycle's slow, and it blows up to a national story, and that person's life is essentially over as he or she knew it.
Ferguson, Missouri, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there are several benchmarks in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So there's pre-Rodney King, post-Rodney King. There's pre-Ferguson, post-Ferguson, right? And then there's pre-Beer Summit, post-Beer Summit, which was the incident I talked about in Cambridge. So I want to transition here to an even darker subject. Sorry, guys. Of suicide and the cost that it takes upon us. So, first I want to give, before we even start on suicide, we know about veteran suicide. We know about a lot of people don't know about law enforcement suicide. Veteran suicide, supposedly 22, and some people will say it's underreported. Veterans kill themselves every day. Mike and I are alumni of an outstanding organization called Operation Restored Warrior. Mike's wearing a shirt with that logo on it right now. They're a phenomenal nonprofit who have a 100% success rate on preventing veteran suicide. So if you're looking for a great charity to donate to, that's one of them. And they're actually starting to cross over into law enforcement now.
Yeah, and I would definitely remember it's Operation Restored Warrior. So many times when you talk about programs that truly get to the heart of the matter of suicide, people automatically just think Wounded Warrior. I don't want to say it again because every time you say it, it duplicates. Operation Restored Warrior, ORW. The other Mighty Oaks up in D.C.
Yeah, Mighty Oaks is another great
program. They're dealing with the spiritual aspects of suicide.
Yeah.
Which, if we get into it, it's a very, very real component.
Yeah. So before we go all the way into that, I'm going to go around here. What's one thing we can do to help stop cops being killed?
Well, let's talk about real quick. So the number one causes of cops being killed: gunfire and automobile accidents. So you guys, firearms instructors, what can officers do to stay fresh and to, be more of a opponent with their firearm?
Well, right now the average officer only shoots his firearm once every 6 months or whatever is mandated. If that. That can't happen. That can't happen. Departments have to start budgeting appropriately for ammunition and training and forcing cops to train. Where if they don't qualify and if they don't do it and they don't raise their standards, they cannot do the job.
You're preaching to the choir, I think, with everybody here. When I was a firearms instructor and tactics instructor for 18 years, I was there in the front when we said, okay, and we got the administration to sign off. If these people don't pass, they're not going to be on the street. We're going to take their gun away from them. And we did it. And the pushback from the administration when these people would go back, could not go out on the street, would be off and getting paid. You have to bring them back to the range until they could qualify. They would complain. It brought so much headache for the administration. One of the things we might get to is micro-political management and management of police departments in general. It wasn't politically correct to have these people not have a gun or to not work, so they end up squashing the program. But you're right. I mean, we have to teach officers firearms and tactics. Firearms and tactics is critical.
So if my department doesn't support me as far as letting me go to the range 10 times a year, 15 times a year, what can I do as an officer in a department that doesn't support that?
One thing you
own?
can do, if there's anybody listening that's in that situation, most departments will allow you an ammunition quota monthly to train. I know Charlottesville would. When you couldn't get to a range day, if you said, hey, can I get 100 rounds to train? Those officers that were proactive in that would be able to do it. So most definitely ask for ammunition to train on your own. Then another phenomenal thing that you can do if your department doesn't do it is IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association, IPSC also have shooting programs where you compete. And I actually did this for many years, where someone's got to kill that thing.
I got it.
There's really not.
No, yeah,
you didn't
No, you
get
didn't.
it.
Squash
You didn't
him.
get it. You didn't get
It's
it.
like that. You guys can't see it, but I got
So
him.
you can go to a local range and join the club and shoot in the competitions that there. It doesn't translate 100%. We recognize that, but it does help your skills.
So another thing to answer your question, scenario-based training is big.
Oh.
I think Sims is probably even more important than firearms when
Yeah.
it comes down to it.
Yeah.
We do something, the
Decision
box
making.
drills, decision making. Yeah, because that's what it comes down to, is to be able to make that right decision in a split second.
Well, I think force on force drills is huge, right? But the thing is, there's so much artificial aspects to that. When I'm going into a training scenario and I know you have blue bullets and I've got red bullets, we're going to shoot. I know it becomes a game. And yes, the stress is elevated and there is definite value there. But I think what really, really, really needs to happen is the breakdown. There's camera footage out there now that people need to see. That there needs to be an institution out there that's breaking down real life and death stuff where it's not, hey, you got yellow paint on you, I got blue paint on me, that's great. I think it needs to be like we saw the videos that haunt me to my day, to my dying days, are cops dying on the side of the highway in a shootout where it's filmed. Well, now with cop cams or lapel cams, there's thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of footage that we all need to see. And that needs to be rolled into that scenario-based training.
You guys did it in the SEALs,
Yeah.
and we did it in SWAT team.
Yeah.
You debrief after every mission, and you
Yes.
say, "This is what we did good. This is what we did bad." And to talk what you're talking about, every when we have an officer mob shooting, the whole department should be looking at that and saying,
Should
"Okay,
be,
what did they
exactly.
do good? What did they do bad? And how can we make it better?"
Yeah, a lot of times they want to take those videos and protect them because, of course, there's liability. They can be sued for releasing it for one way or the other. Two other great tools to answer your question for officers out there that need the training themselves. Number one is get yourself a airsoft gun that matches the exact same gun you carry every single day, right? And with no one in your house, so you don't take someone's eye out. Use that pistol in scenarios in your own house, going through scenarios. Put targets on the wall and talk yourself through it. We used to call it stress situation simulations. When you run it through your mind, doing it right, then you do it, and you do it right. If you don't do it right, you tell yourself how you could have done it better. You go back and you do it until you do it right. And airsoft right now is just amazing. You can get a Glock 19 airsoft gun and use
Got
it.
10 of them upstairs right now.
Phenomenal tool. Another thing you can do, another fantastic thing is exactly what you're talking about. Active self-protection, ASP, A-S-P, active self-protection on Facebook and YouTube. John Correa does a phenomenal job. This guy's a pastor turned firearms enthusiast, YouTuber, takes every single video of shootings all over the world, because they're harder to find in our country because they don't release them, but breaks down the shooting and exactly what happens and shows exactly what went wrong and what could have been done.
What's his knowledge base to articulate that?
That's a really interesting question. John, this was about 7-8 years ago when he started doing this. I just came across it and started watching him.
Has he been shot at?
No, he's not been shot at. Okay, so we can say, hey, anybody who's just using book knowledge, you're worthless. I don't buy that. I think when you have experience, life experience.
Was he a cop?
He was never a cop. He was never shot at. But if you watch his stuff, you've never watched it, you're going to say, "No, he really does get his shit together." So as a tool for you to be watching what's going on and having somebody dissect it, it is a phenomenal tool, and I would encourage you to use it before you.
I'm just going to ask the questions that every shooter out there is going to ask.
You're going to ask. Absolutely.
Right. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'll go to Pat McNamara. I'll go to somebody else
Pat McNamara is
or some of these other people who actually live here.
Pat's not doing that type of work.
He's not, but that's why somebody needs to.
Yeah,
that's why somebody needs to.
Absolutely.
If you have a theorist teaching things, and it's like, have you ever been scared? Have you ever been cold? Have you ever had your hands numb on your gum when you're trying to get it out of the holster? Have you ever had these things?
Right.
And it's like, no, well, of course, from this camera angle, you can say that. So again, I'm sure it's wonderful and I'm sure he's great. It's just that for all you meat eaters out there, that's of course the first thing we always ask.
About driving. What can we do about the driving deaths? All the car
I'm going to turn that to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Wear a seatbelt.
Yeah. Well,
So you're going to get a ticket.
You're going to get a ticket.
isn't that the simplest thing we can do? Isn't it?
Yes.
It is.
So
Yes, it is.
if you work in a urban area and you don't have to wear your seatbelt, there's a very slim likelihood you're going to run into a tree at 70 miles an hour in the middle of the city of Charlottesville, right?
That's right.
So if you're in a more rural area, you want to have your seatbelt on when you're going on those 20-minute code runs to a hot call in the middle of nowhere, for whatever. Also, drive within your ability. I mean, there's so many of us, I know I'm lucky to be here. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, totally. Can I bring
up?
up something before you go there?
Yeah.
How many police departments are actually keeping their vehicles serviced at the levels they should be? Like, you walk around, you look at tires on cars. Holy
Our
smokes!
department's pretty good because
City used to.
because a dealership
We
takes
got
care of
Colonial
that.
doing it. They do
Yeah.
a fantastic
But-
Good on you, but larger police departments,
Yeah, especially
like Boston,
cars, right?
we were rocking pool cars,
Yeah.
and we were rocking Crown Vics in a place where it snows. Now they've all shifted since then, but I mean, I remember going to calls and parking my car at the bottom of the hill because there's no way my Crown Vic's making it up that thing,
I'll tell you what it's interesting. You talk about police cars. I mean, we have seen in our career, cars go from nothing to phenomenal. I mean, I remember driving a Dodge Diplomat in New York City.
I don't even know what a Dodge Diplomat is. Don't anyone tell me what a Dodge Diplomat is? Is that like a Dodge Dart?
Come on.
Is it like a Dodge Dart?
And
Sort of.
and then now today, the cars that you guys have today are just phenomenal. It's a lot safer.
So I
they are
interrupted your
safer,
thought.
but
I didn't mean to do that.
They also have this because they handle so well, and because they have electronic stability control. They give you a false sense of security, and so you just need to be careful not to outdrive the laws of physics. I think that's as young officers, so many officers they want to get there. They want to get there fast. They want to save the day, change the world. Get the bad guy. If you don't make it there, you're not going to make any bit of difference. And so,
Aaron Donahue just piped in and said, we as in citizens all need to move over when passing your vehicles on the side of the road. Too many cops are hit on the side of the road.
That's correct.
There was a female officer just died last week because of that.
And it's the
Impaired
tough-
driver hit her.
the hazards of the occupation.
that's right.
Yeah. So she was pulled over on a stop, and then that tractor beam that happens when someone's drunk and somehow they always hit the car pulled over. I don't understand that, but man, that is some crazy stuff. So you were saying something else.
Just slow down. I mean, we've all been there as younger officers. We've gone way too fast and had that oh my gosh, I almost just died moment, and we lived through it and we learned from it. I'm telling you, don't even get there.
Well, what about the other side of that? And that's working tired. Right. So, I know in Boston, there's a lot of guys who live to do their details. They
Absolutely.
double, triple, quadruple their salaries with their details. So their on shift time becomes like their downtime. So here they are. They try to put in mandates. They put all this stuff in. But guys are still out there. They're working way too long, and they're driving, and they're falling asleep at the wheel, and they're crashing because of that.
Look, that's a good point with Charlottesville, for example. When I came here, I made so little money. And I think it's still the same regardless, that you would have to work 20 hours a week of overtime to make a fair living. And I saw it my entire 25-year career in Charlottesville that gals would work as much overtime as they can because either their wife wanted to stay home with their kids or their pay was so little. I came here in 1988. It was $17,000 a year, right?
Right.
And you have to work all that overtime, which again, it makes you fatigued.
Right.
Because you need the money.
So
it's nice to have decent pay.
So me
having to work there.
and my partner work in the Einstein hours. So I call the Einstein hours from like 4 to 8 a.m. When you work in that shift, that's when there's nothing going on outside of someone crashing. Even the gangbangers have gone to sleep at that time. Right. So that's when we did all of our higher thought time. And what I came up with was, wouldn't it be great if we would pay cops $100K plus cost of living, where they didn't have to work details? So no matter where they were, they made $100K. We paid baseball players what? We paid these people who play a kid's sport what? We paid them a good living and then adjusted it on cost of living. Now, you work in Manhattan, $100K isn't nothing, right? Now, so I think that is a base pay where it's respectable, where you don't have to work 80 hours to make ends meet. Because you're being forced to live in the neighborhoods where you're at, recognizing them, paying them monetary. So let's shift now, because I know it's getting late and I know we've been doing this a lot and Tim's looking sleepy. So I know that, there were days, and it didn't happen to me in Boston, but it happened to me in Elmore, where I sat on the end of my bed and I said, oh my God, what am I doing in this job? I went from being in body armor every day, going every hot call in the city, to something else in rural policing I wasn't prepared for. And, and I went from a strong union presence to a non-union presence. And, when I was in Boston, I was anti-union. I sat there and I was like, you know what? We can't get rid of these ticks. There's people on the job who do absolutely freaking nothing, and we can't get rid of them. And then I came down somewhere where the bosses had all the power, and I'm like, holy smokes! I just got called into internal affairs, and I'm putting my blinker on. Blinker. For putting my blinker on. They call me in, they're like, hey, on July 17th at 3 p.m., did you fail to use your turn signal? I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, yeah, all day, every day. So anyways, I just got there, and the grind, I had depreciated my value. I went from making six-digit figures to getting cut down, taking a $70,000, $80,000 pay cut to do a job in a town. My mortgage was still the same, practically.
Oh yeah, Charles was interesting like that.
Cost
of living here is high.
And I'm like, holy smokes! And then
Be happy I hired him.
yeah.
Be happy I recruited him. You hired him. I recruited him.
So anyways, I just remember those dark days, man, where I didn't see a way out, and I know a lot of guys, when you see the worst of society, when you see, kids dead in the back seat in their cars, or you see rapists and child abuse, and you see domestic abusers, and you see this horrific stuff. It's not like when you're in the military and you deploy and you come home and you get some time down. You're going back on next shift. Sometimes you're held over. It's like you just been to the worst call ever. Your life is in shambles because you just saw, dead kids. And now you're there and you have someone screaming at you saying, hey, why are you having lunch? I pay your salary. You're having lunch.
Then they're screaming at you because you didn't turn your turn signal.
Then they're calling you in for a turn signal.
Yeah. So, Jason, you're talking about suicide.
Yes.
And, I guess one of the ways to segue into that is when you're dealing with the darkest parts of society, that's your job, right? All first responders have this sort of kinship.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether you're a nurse, whether you're a firefighter.
Not EMS, not firefighter, just kidding.
Whether you're EMS. We have this kind of kinship because we're all, now some of those occupations, all kidding aside, they do deal with the death, right? They do deal with death. But they kind of stop there. EMS, when we get there and there's somebody out there who's drunk, who's a fool, we're staging at the corner.
Right.
They're not going in there, and rightfully so, right? A lot of them are volunteers, or a lot of them aren't getting paid much at all. So they should.
The whole volunteer thing blew me away.
Yeah.
We don't have that stuff up north. You get paid for your job.
Yeah. So we're heading that way here too. But so you're dealing with the darkest part of society every time. So on one call, You're dealing with somebody who left her purse in the backseat of her car, or he left his wallet in the car, or his laptop, and then he comes back and it's gone because he left it in plain sight, right? And you're like, yeah, you got to diplomatically tell him, like, what, you always have to make sure everything's covered up or in your trunk so no one can see it, because people do this for a living, right? They break into cars, and without condensation, being condescending, you got to tell them not to do that.
This is not the English channel.
And then, and then the next call, you got to drive code over because someone had just shot somebody, or because somebody's saying they got a problem with the kid, and you get over there, and then the mother's screaming at the kid because for whatever petty reason, and you're like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, so
We're dealing with the darkest part, and then there's the deaths. I mean, how many traffic fatalities have we worked? How many times have we dealt with, like you say, I mean, the worst of all is seeing that dead child.
So Jonathan wrote a book about this, and I'd like to kind of throw it to Jonathan here for a moment. It's this book right here. Anyways, so Jonathan wrote a book on this where, and I'll let him frame it up. But so Jonathan, why did you write Break Every Chain, and what does it cover?
Well, a few years after I started into police work, just dealing with what Mike was talking about, all the dysfunction, brokenness of society, and death that I was seeing, I just didn't know how to process it, and I couldn't handle it. So I turned to alcohol, and I was a functioning alcoholic, addicted to alcohol for over 10 years. And I think that police officers, they can deal with the stuff on the street just fine. They can mask their emotions. They can turn, when they need to put on their game face, take care of business. We do good at that. When your buddies start laughing about it with you, talking about it, you laugh with them.
The dark humor.
Right. But so often that starts to take a toll on our souls, I guess, and we don't realize it until a lot of times it's too late. And there's a stigma out there that in first responders and military, that we're not allowed to talk about it, that we're not to admit that we have a weakness. That's what it's seen as, but it's not a weakness. It's just something that, anyone who's exposed to this kind of repeated trauma is going to develop a need to deal with it, to maybe speak with a counselor or something. And there's no shame in that. And yet, I just remember, here's something that's in the back of my mind, recently had an infant death happen. Young officer, less than probably 2 years. It's the first time he's had to work an infant death scene. And it's an unnatural death. It's not a violent death, but it's still something that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life because you're seeing a dead child like that. And then a few days later in lineup, the sergeant's joking about, oh yeah, you got to see his first dead body, and they go, oh, you look over at the officer, and the officer's like, oh my gosh, like you really said that about this dead infant, and think about the family, and but that's just law enforcement, let's laugh about it. And that just it's not always gonna fill the hole in your heart, you know
Right.
what I'm saying. And so after years of just getting into more and more darkness and not feeling like I could talk to anybody about it. I'm like, oh, everybody else can handle it just fine. What's wrong with me? Why can't I handle this and everybody else is fine? I don't understand it. Like, is there something wrong with me? Am I weak? Am I just not able to deal with the death? And there was a moment that pushed me to the brink where, some things were some tragedy had happened in my own personal life. And that's the point. That's the catalyst. That's the catalyst. So when police officers, we can handle all this stuff on the job to a point, but when things start going south in our own lives, when there's a tragedy that we can't control in our own life, that's when you can't fix it. All of a sudden, you've gone from the fixer to the one who can't fix anything. And so what do you do? Can you talk to your police buddies about it? When you're facing these feelings of despair and brokenness and you want to kill yourself. If you talk to your police buddies or your military buddies about it, are they going to laugh at you? Are they going to understand? You know,
Are they going to report you?
Are they going to report you? Yeah.
Oftentimes they just they want to protect their own tough exterior, so they just kind of like
That's
blow it off,
Right.
and then that exacerbates when maybe I'm just supposed to blow it off, but then it builds and the pressure builds.
Right.
The expectation of us to be perfect is very stressful. I mean, Mike will probably tell you, how much stress did you lose the day you left the job?
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
I talked to Todd Hop, was a friend of mine.
Yep.
He was in a job pretty much a indoor job for a couple of years, but when the day he left, stress went away.
Yep.
So it's that idea that you have to be perfect all the time for 25 years that eventually gets to you on top of everything that Jonathan's talking about. So.
Yeah. And so I just think that there's so many officers out there who, you know, don't do the greatest job of balancing.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to remember your family and you have to remember yourself and not just live for the job. And that's preventative maintenance.
Yeah.
But if you got to the point where you're hurting so bad and you just don't feel like you can talk to anybody and the only answer is to kill yourself, and of course with police it's always with guns because you know, I guess we love guns, right? You know, it's just such a sad preventable situation. And I found myself in that situation. That's one of the reasons that I did write the book that we're talking about. And I don't mean to make this an ad for the book. You know, law enforcement suicide is a huge problem. It's a huge, sad issue. We lost more police officers to suicide this year than to line of duty deaths.
That's every year. It's
Yeah.
always
Every
more
year.
police officers
Yeah.
killed, and it's an underreported statistic. This year, I think it's 156.
Yeah.
We're at 148.
Because there's shame.
The shame,
the shame
absolutely.
of the suicide,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So even after they're dead, now you know it's almost like what they were most fearing has now come true.
Yeah.
And so you know what helped me was a step into faith, and I won't go into all that, but that's what saved me,
Right.
And that's what helped me bring me back into balance.
So, you know, I was an atheist for 37 years. And I remember the guys who did the best with handling, you know, deployments in and out, seeing things that were uncomfortable to see, tended to be the guys who had faith, who were Christians. And that's what drew me to it eventually there was a guy named Travis McNeese. Travis, shout out to you. And I started off like I always do. I made fun of him forever because as a scientist raised in the secular Northeast, where I just beat up Christians my whole life. And you know, I started with him, and he was patient with me, and he walked me through it. And then eventually, you know, I became a Christian and was baptized, accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and it's given me a way different perspective. And I know there are other ways out there, and I know guys use other programs, and I know Boston Police uses a peer support program that is very effective. It's very similar to AA or what you're talking about, where guys who've been on the job a while, who are respected, you know, go to guys, you know, one of the, you know, who might be hurting, and they, you know, it's 100%. No one can get into those records. No one knows about those records. They're protected by law, you know, and that's the thing I think that cops are afraid of.
Well, yeah, isolation. It all comes down to if you isolate yourself and you isolate yourself in the darkness, then that's the dangerous place to be.
Just imagine you walk into your boss's office and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of killing myself." What are they going to do? They're going to take your gun. They're going to put you on a freaking desk job. You can't work details anymore, and there your salary went from here to poof.
Right.
Right.
You know, we had a program in the 90s, started in the early 90s, and it kind of petered out around 2000. It was called a peer stress debriefer. And the officers that were sent to this learned it was pretty heavy psychology light of
Right.
how to exactly do that. When you met with one of your peer debriefers, it could not be recorded. They could not be compelled to testify against you in any way. You know, and that was so critical. You know, we had many officer-involved shootings and many critical incidents like that one you're talking about with the infant being killed, and it was mandatory. You had to go meet with a peer debriefer. And that was a one-on-one. There was no sergeant in the room, you know, that wasn't even in the police department. And you had to go talk. And that person had experience because that person had taken someone's life or had worked a terrible fatality, right? And so they knew. And just the act of you decompressing with that person, and they were trained to not push, to not dig, but to just be there, to be that sounding board, because they would tell you honestly, yeah, man, I've dealt with that, as opposed to, we all deal with it, it'll be fine. You know, but that program, I don't even know where it is anymore, if it's even, if it's active.
Yeah, we do it in Albemarle.
You do it now?
We do it in Albemarle. We
That's
also-
great.
We
On
don't-
call site.
I don't know that we do mandatory debriefs. I think we.
It's
need
not
to-
mandatory, but it's, there's a
See,
peer
that's the
debriefing
problem.
team.
See, it
If
used
it's
to-
not mandatory, are you going to be like,
No.
oh, I need help?
Listen, the
You know?
military, the program that I work with, Operation Restored Warrior,
Yeah.
right? The whole paradigm has changed because they never would make you go talk to somebody, right? Because everybody would say, hey, no, I'm not going to go in there. I'm a man. I got this under control. So they wouldn't go. So now you have to go. You have to talk. And, you know, the onus is on you then in that private setting. But, you know, what's important is the respect of the program so that the guys and gals trust the program. Because it used to be.
Well, it has to be insulated because we're all
Some of the things
afraid.
you're talking about could be, legal issues and everything else.
Yeah.
Right,
That's why you
exactly.
have to have that trust that Mike's talking about.
You know, you have to have that because they're afraid you're going to take their livelihood and their independence and the way they make their
Yeah.
living. Because that's the number one. I think I don't think guys are so much afraid of like giving up their manhood as if I say I have a problem, now I'm on the radar.
Mm-hmm.
Any mistake I make, they're going to attribute it to this and I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Right. And next thing you know, I'm fired
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm unemployed, you know, and that's the part that I don't know how to handle that. You know, I don't know what the right balance is there. I know there has to be some balance in there, you know, but
Yeah, I think nationally, police departments are dealing with that. And there's some departments that have better models
Mm-hmm.
than others as far as peer support.
yeah.
But there are obviously some that
Need some
better.
program.
I know Boston, even their peer support units, they've lost too many people to suicide. I know I've been to far too many of them up there, and it's just sad. So, Jonathan, somebody who reads your book, what is the top 3 takeaways they're going to get from that?
That you're not alone. That everyone, that not just police officers, first responders, but everybody's broken in some way.
Right.
That we're all hurting in some way, and if you trust God with your life, then He can redeem you and give you a new sense of purpose in life.
Okay. Rob, what's something you learned tonight that you didn't know coming into this? Is there anything? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, not at all. But I think this whole conversation about talking versus not talking, and then having read your book, and you talked in a very public way, but I mean, it's not always going to be like that for everybody. But the downside of honestly sharing what you're going through with your peers that you just referenced, that never struck me before. And I think that's a serious issue that needs to be addressed head on. Like you said, I don't know what to do about it. Hey, you've been there. You've served, you understand this, and you don't have a solution. I don't know that there is one, but we certainly have to talk about it. And I think at least understand where the clear boundaries are for people to encourage them to share and not to bear this burden.
Yeah, so just imagine the complexity of this issue. If a DJ is suicidal, is he going to hurt anyone by being suicidal? Maybe, but he's not. He gets on air, it's a publicity, it's not whatever. He's not a trigger puller for a profession. Right. He doesn't have to make life and death decisions off of pulling his thing. A dentist doesn't have to do that. A store clerk, a banker, a million other things. Law enforcement and military have to make life and death decisions in a split second. And how do we address this problem where they're hurting, they need to decompress, they need help, but they don't want to give up their jobs? What are you going to do? Oh, you've had a traumatic incident, you're out? No, because then no one's ever going to report it. So we really need to figure that out. And I don't know the answer. Do you guys have?
I heard Australia gives you a year paid leave every 6 years or something like that.
Oh, wow.
We should do that.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Hey, you want answers?
Yeah.
We all have known police officers that have been killed in the line of duty. I've known half a dozen. In fact, very interesting. When I came here in 1988 and 1989, I went to the police memorial just as a cop, not on a detail. And one of the guys that I went to the police academy was being honored. He was killed in that year that I'd gone. 3 years since I last saw him at the academy, he was killed. Mm. So we all deal with that aspect. That's a lot less. There's 150 cops killed a year, more or less. We've known over our career some of them, but how many of us know, those guys that take their own lives, right?
Yeah.
And as you guys probably know, recently, we've had to struggle with that. And it's, you think, what in the world could we have done different? What more could we have done? Because it's so easy and it's so quick that when a police officer decides they can do it, like you say, they've got a pistol with them 24/7, right? For me, what I lean on, and I know what you lean on personally, is a large spiritual aspect to this, right? I mean, when you go to ORW, Operation Restored Warrior, they take the first day of that program just to have you consider and recognize that you are a created being knit together in your mother's womb by God. Once you accept that, then you can start moving forward into understanding the spiritual aspects of what's going on. And for me, and for probably all of us, I recognize that, there is an enemy, there is a God. And the enemy doesn't want you to live. And God does want you to live. And to me, that is one of the most critical, because sure, you can use the psychological angles, right?
It's the ultimate battle of good versus evil.
You're right, because I knew you hinted on that earlier, because that thin blue line is between good and evil, right? It is the ultimate battle, because there is a God, he has created you, and he does love you. And there is an enemy, and he does want you dead. And if he can get you to take your own life, he will. So the spiritual aspects of this are tremendous. What do military and law enforcement have in common? The highest rates of suicide in the country, right? Military is overseas dealing with death as their occupation, right? And then cops, not as much, but we're here dealing with death as our occupation.
Well, I think it's beyond death. I think it's suffering in the worst parts of humanity.
Agreed.
And then what happens, cops, like what's the divorce rate in cops? It's insane.
75%.
Yeah, the same thing with SEALs.
How many people have been divorced?
Yeah, exactly.
Three?
Only by the grace of God.
Amen.
Yeah.
By the grace of God.
Amen.
So,
Amen.
it's such a big, big toll. So to take, there's Nietzsche, who's a secularist and an atheist, who said, to balance your comment was, be wary, men, when staring long into the abyss. That the abyss gazing long into the abyss gazes long into you. And be wary when fighting monsters, not to become monsters yourself. So even he recognized that, the toll that fighting evil can take its toll.
That's right.
So, it's something that basically the moral of this story is you need help, whether it's your creator or somebody else, go get it and know that you're not alone in this. So I'm going to wrap this up. Is there anything else that we got here?
Just lean on your family and friends when you need them. I mean, that's what I did through rough times. Yeah.
So
It made a difference.
Yeah, I want to thank our guests today. I want to thank, Albemarle County and for sending Tim Seitz on over here. Actually, Tim's a good friend of mine. They didn't send him over here. But as well as Jonathan
You mean
Hickory.
he's getting paid for this?
Yeah, no.
I'm not getting paid.
I want to thank my good friend Mike Farruggio. And I want to thank Rob Schilling for coming today and helping us run this and not letting me totally muck this up. So thank you very much. Is there any questions that we missed online?
I think there's a lot of comments for you all to read afterwards, but you hit the meat of it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for turning into this first edition of Lock and Shields. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something tonight. We're going to take this, break it down into digestible bites and post it on YouTube. And that's where you'll be able to find this. So again, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless America.
God bless America.
All right. Have a good one.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more safety tips, interviews, and commentary on breaking news. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and comment below. And you can always find more information about us at tridentshield.net.